The ship came out of hyperspace with a soft hum. Commander Daniel Hayes stood at the viewport and watched the planet grow larger. Velkar Prime was a world of purple oceans and golden continents. It was beautiful in a strange way, but Daniel was not here for the view. He was here to make history. The Velkari had finally agreed to let humanity join their ancient bonding ritual. For 10,000 years, their noble houses had offered daughters to allied species as a sign of trust and friendship. It was their highest honor. No human had ever been given this chance before. Daniel straightened his uniform. He was 34 years old, with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. He was not the strongest man in the fleet, nor the smartest, but he had a gift that his superiors valued. He could read people. He noticed things that others missed. The shuttle bay doors opened, and Daniel walked down the ramp with his small team. Lieutenant Kevin Park walked beside him, checking his datapad nervously. Behind them came Dr. Susan Cole, the team's cultural expert. A group of Velkari warriors waited at the bottom of the ramp. They were tall, almost 8 feet each, with scaled skin that shimmered in the sunlight. Their eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, like cats. They wore armor made of black metal and carried weapons that looked like curved swords. The leader of the group stepped forward. His scales were deep blue, and his voice was deep when he spoke. "Human, I am War Captain Drell. High Chieftain Zorath awaits you in the Great Hall. Follow." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you, War Captain. Lead the way." They walked through the streets of the capital city. The buildings were made of white stone and reached toward the sky like spears. Velkari citizens stopped to stare at the humans. Some pointed. Others whispered to each other. Daniel heard the word small repeated many times. He did not let it bother him. Humans were used to being underestimated. The Great Hall was enormous. It could have held 1,000 people easily. The ceiling was so high that clouds seemed to float inside. Torches burned along the walls, casting dancing shadows everywhere. At the far end of the hall sat High Chieftain Zorath on a throne made of bones. He was the largest Velkari Daniel had ever seen. His scales were deep red, almost black, and scars covered his arms and face. He had ruled his house for 200 years. Beside the throne stood other alien dignitaries. Daniel recognized the Kryn, insect-like creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes. He also saw the Shurdai, beings made of living crystal that reflected light in rainbow patterns. They had all come to watch the choosing ceremony. Daniel stopped at the proper distance and bowed his head respectfully. "High Chieftain Zorath, I am Commander Daniel Hayes of Earth. I thank you for this honor." Zorath studied him with cold yellow eyes. His voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Human, your kind is young. You have been among the stars for only 300 years. My people have ruled this sector for 10,000. Many said I was foolish to include you in our sacred ritual." He paused and leaned forward on his throne. "Prove them wrong." Zorath raised one massive hand. From a side door, 7 figures walked into the hall. They were his daughters, the princesses of House Zorath. Daniel watched them approach. The first 6 were everything he expected. They were tall and strong, with scales in brilliant colors. Red, blue, green, gold, silver, and purple. Each one moved with the grace of a trained warrior. Their muscles rippled beneath their scales. They held their heads high with pride and confidence. The crowd murmured with approval. The Kryn clicked their mandibles in appreciation. The Shurdai chimed softly, their crystal bodies vibrating with interest. Then the 7th daughter entered. She was different. Smaller than her sisters by at least a foot. Her scales were a dull gray, like old metal left in the rain. She walked with her eyes down, her shoulders hunched slightly forward. She did not look at anyone. The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter began. It started as quiet chuckles. Then it grew louder. The Valkyrie nobles pointed at the Grey Daughter and made jokes to each other. Even some of Zorth's own guards smiled with amusement. The Kryn ambassador made a clicking sound that his translator turned into harsh laughter. Daniel watched the seventh daughter. He saw her flinch at the sound of the laughter. He saw her hands curl into fists at her sides. But she did not look up. She had heard this laughter before, many times. High Chieftain Zorth gestured toward his daughters. "These are my children, human. Warriors all, trained in combat since they could walk. Any of them would bring honor to your people. Choose wisely." Daniel started walking toward the daughters. He passed the first one with her brilliant red scales and proud smile. She was the eldest. She expected to be chosen. Daniel kept walking. He passed the second daughter, the one with blue scales. She flexed her muscles as he approached, showing off her strength. Daniel kept walking. He passed the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth daughters. Each one was more impressive than the last. Each one looked at him with confidence, certain that she would be the one. Daniel stopped in front of the seventh daughter. The hall went completely silent. The Grey Daughter finally looked up. Her eyes were amber, like honey in sunlight. There was surprise in those eyes. And something else. Fear, perhaps. Or hope. Daniel studied her face for a long moment. Then he extended his hand toward her. "I choose her," he said clearly. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The hall was so quiet that Daniel could hear his own breathing. Then the laughter exploded. It was not quiet this time. It was loud and cruel. The Valkyrie nobles howled with amusement. The Kryn ambassador nearly fell over. Even the Sherdai flickered with colors that meant mockery. High Chieftain Zorth did not laugh. His face showed something worse. Shame. His jaw tightened, and his claws dug into the armrests of his throne. "Human," he said slowly, "do you understand what you are doing? You are choosing Lyra, my weakest daughter. She has no battle honors, no kills to her name. She's the shame of my house." Daniel did not look away from Lyra. "I understand." The laughter continued around them. But Daniel kept his hand extended. After a moment, Lyra slowly reached out and took it. Her hand was trembling. The crowd thought it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. A weak human choosing a weak Valkyrie. It was perfect. Lieutenant Park leaned close to Daniel. "Sir, what are you doing?" Any of the others would have been better choices. "This will make humanity look foolish." Daniel smiled slightly. "Watch and learn, Lieutenant. My grandmother taught me something important when I was young. She said the ripest fruit is not always the brightest one. Sometimes the best things are hidden." Lyra heard his words. She looked at him with her amber eyes, and for the first time, there was something new in them. Not fear, not shame. Curiosity. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "Come on, let us get out of here." They walked out of the great hall together, followed by the sound of laughter. Daniel did not look back. He had made his choice, and he was certain it was the right one. He just did not know yet how right he truly was. The walk from the great hall to the shuttle was long. Daniel could feel eyes watching him from every window and doorway. The Valkyrie citizens had already heard the news. The human had chosen the Grey Daughter, the weakest one. The shame of House Zorth. Lyra walked beside him in silence. Her gray scales seemed even duller in the afternoon light. She kept her head down, watching her own feet as they moved across the stone streets. Lieutenant Park and Dr. Cole followed behind them. Park kept shaking his head and sighing. Cole was typing notes into her datapad, probably trying to figure out how to explain this choice to their superiors back on Earth. When they reached the shuttle, War Captain Drell was waiting. His face showed no emotion, but his voice was cold. "Human, you have made your choice. The ceremony is complete. You may leave our world." He paused and looked at Lyra. Take her. She was never truly one of us anyway. Lyra flinched at his words. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his face calm. Thank you for your hospitality, War Captain. Please give my regards to the High Chieftain. Drell said nothing. He simply turned and walked away, his black armor catching the light. Daniel guided Lyra up the ramp and into the shuttle. The doors closed behind them, and suddenly the outside world was gone. It was just the four of them now, in the quiet hum of the ship. Lyra stood in the middle of the cargo bay, looking lost. She had probably never been on an alien ship before. Everything was different here. The walls were smooth metal instead of carved stone. The lights were bright and steady instead of flickering torches. Dr. Cole approached her carefully, like someone approaching a wild animal. Hello, Lyra. I am Dr. Susan Cole. I study cultures. I want you to know that you are safe here. Lyra nodded but did not speak. Daniel sat down in one of the seats and gestured to the one across from him. Please, sit. We have a long journey to the horizon. That is our main ship. It is waiting in orbit. Lyra sat down slowly. Her movements were careful, as if she expected the chair to break beneath her. She folded her hands in her lap and finally looked up at Daniel. Why? She asked. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. Daniel met her amber eyes. Why what? Why did you choose me? You could have had any of my sisters. Vela is the strongest warrior in our generation. Kira has the most beautiful scales. Zara has killed more enemies than any other noble daughter. They all wanted to be chosen. They would have brought you honor and glory. She paused, and her voice became even quieter. I would bring you nothing. I am weak. I have no skills that anyone values. My own father cannot look at me without shame. So why? Why would you choose me? Daniel leaned back in his seat and thought about her question. The shuttle engines hummed to life, and he felt the gentle push of acceleration as they lifted off from the planet. Before I left Earth, he said finally, I read everything I could about the Valkyrie. Your history, your customs, your values. Your people worship strength. You believe that power is everything. The strong rule and the weak serve. Lyra nodded. This is the way of things. Maybe, but humans see things differently. Daniel smiled slightly. Where I come from, some of our greatest heroes were not the strongest or the fastest. They were the ones who thought differently. The ones who saw what others missed. The ones who were underestimated. He leaned forward and looked into her eyes. When I walked into that hall, I watched all 7 of you. Your sisters stood tall and proud. They expected to be chosen. They looked at me like I was a prize to be won. But you, he paused. You looked at everyone else. You noticed things. When a servant dropped a tray in the corner, your sisters did not even glance over. But you looked. You saw. You cared. Lyra blinked in surprise. You noticed that? I notice everything. It is my job. Daniel sat back again. Your sisters are warriors. They would fight for me if ordered. But you would think for me. You would see dangers before they arrived. You would understand enemies that others could not. That is more valuable than any sword. The shuttle broke through the atmosphere, and stars appeared outside the viewport. Lyra turned to look at them. Her gray scales caught the starlight, and for a moment, they seemed to shimmer faintly. No one has ever said such things to me, she said quietly. My whole life, I have been told that I am worthless. My sisters called me Ghost because of my pale scales. My father barely speaks to me. The servants pity me. I learned to make myself small, to disappear into corners, because it was easier than being seen. Daniel shook his head. You will not have to disappear on my ship. Every person there has value. Every person matters. That is the human way. Lyra looked back at him. There were tears forming in her amber eyes, but she did not let them fall. "Perhaps humans are not as foolish as everyone believes," she said. Daniel laughed softly. "Oh, we can be very foolish. But sometimes we get things right." The horizon appeared ahead of them, floating in the darkness like a silver arrow. It was not a warship, but it was beautiful in its own way. Sleek and fast, designed for diplomacy rather than battle. When they docked, Captain Maria Santos was waiting in the landing bay. She was a small woman with dark hair and sharp eyes. She had commanded the horizon for 15 years and had seen more of the galaxy than most admirals. She looked at Lyra with curiosity, not judgment. "Welcome aboard, Lyra of House Azorth. I am Captain Santos. This ship is now your home." Lyra bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you, Captain. I will try not to be a burden." Santos raised an eyebrow. "On my ship, no one is a burden. Everyone contributes. We will find your strengths, and you will use them." She glanced at Daniel. "Commander Hayes seems to think you have potential. I trust his judgment." Over the next few days, Lyra began to explore the ship. She was hesitant at first, staying in her quarters and only coming out for meals. But slowly, she started to venture further. The crew treated her with kindness. They did not laugh at her gray scales. They did not whisper about her weakness. They simply accepted her as one of them. Lyra was amazed by this. On Velkar, she had been invisible at best and mocked at worst. Here, people asked her opinion. They wanted to know about her world, her customs, her thoughts. She spent hours in the observation deck, watching the stars pass by. Sometimes Daniel would join her, and they would talk about nothing and everything. One evening, Lyra finally asked the question that had been burning inside her. "Daniel, do you truly believe I have value? Or are you simply being kind?" Daniel turned to face her. "I believe you have more value than you know. More than anyone knows. I cannot explain it, but I feel it. There is something inside you, Lyra. Something hidden. Something powerful." Lyra's scales flickered slightly in the dim light. "You cannot know that." "No," Daniel agreed. "But I trust my instincts. And my instincts say that choosing you was the best decision I have ever made." Lyra said nothing. But for the first time since he had met her, she smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile. But it was real dot, and somewhere deep inside her, in a place she had kept locked away for her entire life, something stirred. Something ancient, something powerful. Something waiting to be awakened. 3 weeks passed on the horizon. The ship traveled from system to system, carrying out diplomatic missions. Daniel attended meetings with alien leaders. He negotiated trade deals. He smiled and shook hands and represented humanity to the galaxy. Lyra was always nearby. She watched and listened and learned. She was fascinated by how humans handled conflict. They did not threaten or demand. They talked. They compromised. They found solutions that helped everyone. It was strange to her. On Velkar, disputes were settled with blood. The strong took what they wanted. The weak accepted their fate. But humans had a different way. She was beginning to understand why Daniel had chosen her. He did not need a warrior. He needed someone who could see beneath the surface of things. Someone who could understand enemies and allies alike. One night, Lyra was sleeping in her quarters when the alarm screamed to life. Red lights flashed on the walls. The ship shook violently, throwing her from her bed. She pulled on her clothes and ran into the corridor. Crew members were rushing in every direction, their faces tight with fear. Lieutenant Park ran past her. "Get to the bridge," he shouted. "We are under attack." Lyra followed him through the ship. Her hearts were pounding in her chest. The Valkyrie had 2 hearts, and right now both of them were racing. The bridge was chaos when she arrived. Officers were shouting at each other. Screens showed enemy ships surrounding them like wolves around wounded prey. Captain Santa stood in the center of it all, her voice cutting through the noise. "Report, how many ships?" 12 confirmed, Captain," someone answered. "Wraith Raiders. They came out of subspace right on top of us." Lyra felt her blood turn cold. She had heard stories of the Wraith. Everyone had. They were pirates and slavers, the most feared criminals in the known galaxy. They attacked without warning and showed no mercy. Those they captured were sold in the dark markets of the Outer Rim. Daniel was already on the bridge, studying the tactical display. His face was calm, but Lyra could see the tension in his shoulders. "They are blocking every escape route," he said quietly. "This was planned. They knew exactly where we would be." Captain Santos nodded grimly. "The Horizon is a diplomatic ship. We have shields, but minimal weapons. We cannot fight our way out of this." Another explosion rocked the ship. Sparks flew from a console on the left side of the bridge. An officer screamed and fell back, his arm burned. "Hull breach on deck 7. Someone shouted. "Emergency force fields are holding, but we cannot take much more of this." A cold voice came through the communication system. It was the Wraith commander, and he sounded amused. "Attention, Alliance vessel. This is Commander Vex of the Wraith Brotherhood. You are surrounded and outgunned. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and we will destroy you. Surrender, and some of you might live long enough to be sold." He laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the bridge. Humans fetch good prices these days. Young species are always popular with collectors. Captain Santos muted the channel and turned to her officers. "Options?" Lieutenant Park shook his head. "We cannot win a fight. If we surrender, maybe we can buy time for a rescue." "There is no rescue coming," Daniel said. "We are 3 days from the nearest Alliance outpost. By the time anyone realizes we are missing, we will be scattered across a dozen slave markets." Silence fell over the bridge. Everyone knew he was right. Lyra stood in the corner, watching. Her gray scales felt strange, tight against her skin. There was a pressure building inside her chest, like a storm trying to break free. She had felt this before, many times. It had started when she was a child, this strange feeling. Her mother had noticed it and told her to bury it deep. Never let it out. Never let anyone see. Her mother had been afraid. Lyra had never understood why. But now, watching these humans face death with courage they should not have, she began to understand something. She had been hiding all her life. She had been making herself small, pretending to be weak. She was tired of hiding. Lyra stepped forward. Her scales began to change. The dull gray color shifted, revealing patterns beneath the surface. Lines of pale silver light traced across her skin like veins of lightning. Daniel noticed first. His eyes went wide. "Lyra?" She did not answer him. She walked toward the communication console, her movements smooth and certain. The crew members stepped aside, staring at her with confusion and fear. "Open a channel to the Wraith commander," she said. Her voice was different now, deeper, older. The officer at the console looked at Captain Santos. Santos hesitated, then nodded. The screen flickered, and Commander Vex appeared. He was a Wraith, tall and thin with skin like black leather and eyes that glowed red in the darkness. He grinned when he saw Lyra. "What is this? The Valkyrie runt wants to speak? I have seen your record, little ghost. I have seen your record. You are the shame of your house. What could you possibly say that would matter?" Lyra looked at him. The light patterns on her scales grew brighter, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. "You do not know what I am," she said calmly. Vex laughed. "You are prey. Nothing more. No." Lyra raised one hand, and the air around her fingers began to shimmer. I am something your ancestors prayed they would never meet. I am something my own people tried to destroy. I am what hides in the void between stars. The laughter died on Vex's lips. His red eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Lyra spoke a single word. It was not in any language the translator could handle. It was older than language itself. It came from a place beyond space, beyond time. The word hit Vex like a physical blow. He staggered back from his console, his face twisting with terror. No, he whispered. It cannot be. They are all dead. We made sure of it. Lyra smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You were wrong. She turned to face the viewport. Outside, the Wraith ships hung in space, their weapons still pointed at the horizon. Lyra raised both hands, and the universe answered. Space itself seemed to bend around her fingers. The stars outside the viewport stretched and warped. The bridge crew grabbed consoles and walls as reality itself began to shake. Daniel watched in amazement. He could not understand what he was seeing. It was impossible. It broke every law of physics he knew. But it was happening. Lyra's voice echoed through the bridge, through the ship, through space itself. You came here looking for prey, she said. You found something else. The Wraith ships began to collapse. It happened slowly at first. Their hulls crumpled inward like paper being crushed by invisible hands. Metal screamed and tore. Escape pods launched in panic, only to be caught in the same force that was destroying the ships. Vex's voice came through the speakers one last time. He was screaming, begging, Please. We surrender. We will leave. Just stop. Lyra did not stop. Within 60 seconds, the entire Wraith fleet was gone. All that remained were balls of crushed metal, no larger than a man's head, floating in the empty void. Lyra lowered her hands. The light in her scales faded. The strange pressure in the air disappeared. She swayed on her feet, exhausted. Daniel rushed forward and caught her before she could fall. I have you, he said softly. I have you. Lyra looked up at him with tired amber eyes. Now you know, she whispered. Now you know what I am. The bridge was completely silent. Every officer stared at Lyra with a mixture of awe and fear. But Daniel just smiled. I knew from the beginning, he said. I knew you were special. I just did not know how special. Lyra closed her eyes and let herself rest against him. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like hiding. Lyra slept for 2 days after destroying the Wraith fleet. The ship's doctor, a kind man named Dr. Nathan Gray, stayed by her side the entire time. He ran every scan he could think of, but his equipment was not designed for Volcari biology. I have no idea how she did what she did, he told Daniel privately. Her vital signs are normal. Her brain activity is normal. There is nothing in her body that should allow her to manipulate space itself. And yet we all saw it happen. Daniel sat in a chair beside Lyra's bed. He had barely left the medical bay since the attack. She is something different, he said. Something rare. Different is one word for it. Dr. Gray shook his head. Terrifying is another. On the 3rd day, Lyra finally woke up. She opened her amber eyes slowly, blinking at the bright lights of the medical bay. When she saw Daniel sitting beside her, she smiled weakly. You stayed, she said, her voice rough from sleep. Of course I stayed. Daniel leaned forward. How do you feel? Lyra took a moment to think about the question. Empty, like I poured out everything that was inside me. She paused, but also free. For the first time in my life, I do not feel like I am carrying a heavy weight. Daniel nodded slowly. You saved everyone on this ship, Lyra. Over 200 people are alive because of you. Lyra looked away. I killed many people too. The Wraith crews. They died because of me. They were slavers. They would have done terrible things to us. I know. Lyra closed her eyes. I am not sorry they are dead, but I am not proud of killing them either. It is a strange feeling. Daniel reached out and took her hand. That is called being human. Lyra laughed softly. I am not human. No, but you are more human than most humans I know. Later that day, when Lyra was strong enough to sit up, Captain Santos came to the medical bay. She brought Lieutenant Park and Dr. Cole with her. They stood at the foot of Lyra's bed, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and caution. Lyra, Santos began, I think we all deserve an explanation. What happened out there? What are you? Lyra looked at the faces around her. These were good people. They had treated her with kindness when her own family had not. They deserved the truth. I am a Void Weaver, she said. The words hung in the air. Park and Cole looked confused. Santos narrowed her eyes. I have never heard that term, Santos said. Lyra nodded slowly. You would not have. My people have tried to erase all memory of Void Weavers from history. They fear us. They hate us. They have hunted us for thousands of years. She took a deep breath and continued. Long ago, before the Valkyrie built their empire, there was a different kind of our people. We did not just live in the universe. We could touch it. We could reach into the fabric of space and change it. We could bend reality like you would bend a piece of cloth. That is impossible, Park said. The laws of physics. Your laws of physics are incomplete, Lyra interrupted gently. The universe is larger than your science understands. There are forces that exist beyond measurement. The Void Weavers could access those forces. Santos leaned against the wall. If your people were so powerful, why did the Valkyrie hunt them? Lyra's face became sad. Because power creates fear. The Valkyrie warriors saw the Void Weavers as a threat to their control. They could not fight us with swords and ships. So they attacked us in other ways. They called us demons. They turned our own families against us. They taught children that Void Weavers were evil, that we would destroy the world if we were allowed to live. She paused, gathering herself. There was a great war, thousands of years ago. The warriors hunted the Void Weavers across the galaxy. They killed almost all of us. The few who survived went into hiding. They learned to disguise their power, to make themselves look weak and ordinary. Your gray scales, Daniel said quietly. Lyra nodded. My true scales are silver, bright as starlight. But I learned to dim them when I was very young. My mother was a Void Weaver too, though her power was weak. She recognized what I was and taught me to hide. She was terrified that I would be discovered. What happened to her? Cole asked softly. She died when I was 12. An illness. Or so I was told. Lyra's voice became bitter. I think my father had her killed when he discovered what she was. He has always been ashamed of me. Now I understand why. He knows what I am, or at least suspects it. That is why he was happy to give me away to the humans. He wanted me gone. Silence filled the room. Daniel squeezed her hand. You are not gone. You are here. With us. Lyra looked at him with tears in her eyes. You do not understand. Now that I have used my power, others will know. The Valkyrie have ways of detecting Void Weavers. They will come for me. Then we will protect you, Santos said firmly. You saved this ship and everyone on it. We do not abandon our people. I am not your people. Santos smiled. You are now. Over the next few weeks, the Horizon continued its journey while the crew tried to understand what they had witnessed. Lyra spent hours with Dr. Gray, trying to explain her abilities in terms he could understand. Think of space as water, she said one afternoon. Most people see it as flat and empty, but it is not. It has currents and depths. There are places where space is thin and places where it is thick. A void weaver can feel these differences. We can swim through space in ways that others cannot. And you can manipulate it, Gray said. Like you did with those ships. Lyra nodded. Space is not as solid as people think. It can be folded, compressed, stretched. When I destroyed those ships, I simply pushed the space around them inward. Everything inside was crushed. Gray stared at her. That is the most terrifying thing I have ever heard. It is why my people were hunted. Imagine an army that could collapse enemy fortresses with a thought. Imagine assassins who could step through walls by bending space around them. The Valkyrie warriors could not compete. So they did the only thing they could. They tried to destroy us all. Meanwhile, Daniel was dealing with the political consequences of what had happened. His communication with Earth was full of difficult conversations. His superiors wanted to know everything about Lyra. Some saw her as a weapon to be used. Others saw her as a threat to be contained. Daniel defended her fiercely. She's not a weapon. She is a person. She saved our lives. We owe her protection, not imprisonment. The debate continued for days. But in the end, Daniel's arguments won. Lyra would be offered sanctuary among the humans. She would be treated as a guest, not a prisoner. When Daniel told her the news, Lyra cried. It was the first time he had ever seen her cry. I do not understand, she said through her tears. Why would your people protect me? I am dangerous. I am a monster. Daniel shook his head. You are not a monster. You are brave and kind and intelligent. You stayed hidden your whole life to protect yourself. You used your power only when innocent lives were at stake. That is not what monsters do. He smiled at her. Monsters destroy without reason. You destroyed to protect. There is a difference. Lyra wiped her eyes. No one has ever seen me this way before. Then everyone else was blind. Daniel took her hand. From the moment I saw you in that hall, I knew you were special. Not because of your power, because of who you are. The power is just part of you. It does not define you. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for choosing me. Daniel held her tight. It was the easiest choice I ever made. Outside the viewport, the stars burned bright and cold. Somewhere out there, the Valkyrie were learning what had happened. Somewhere out there, enemies were gathering. But for now, in this moment, there was only peace, and hope. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. A Void Weaver had been found. Not just found, but bonded to a human. The Alliance Council called an emergency meeting on the neutral station called Unity. Every major species sent representatives. This was the biggest event in 100 years. The Horizon arrived at Unity after a week of travel. Daniel stood at the viewport, watching the massive station grow larger. It was shaped like a wheel, spinning slowly in the void. Ships from a dozen different species docked at its ports. Lyra stood beside him. Her scales were still gray, but there was a new confidence in the way she held herself. She no longer hunched her shoulders or kept her eyes down. She looked at the station directly, without fear. Are you ready for this? Daniel asked. Lyra thought about it. No, but I will do it anyway. That is what courage is, yes? Doing things even when you are afraid. Daniel smiled. That is exactly what courage is. The council chamber was enormous. It was built to hold representatives from species of all sizes. The Kryn ambassador sat in a special section designed for beings with multiple legs. The Shurt-Eye representatives floated in zero-gravity bubbles, their crystal bodies chiming softly. And there, in the largest section, sat High Chieftain Zorath and his warriors. Daniel walked into the chamber with Lyra at his side. Captain Santos and Lieutenant Park followed behind them. Every eye in the room turned to watch them enter. The council speaker, a tall being with silver skin and no visible face, called the meeting to order. We are gathered to discuss the events of 3 weeks ago. A Void Weaver, thought to be extinct, has revealed herself. She destroyed 12 Wraith warships with a single display of power. The galaxy has not seen such an event in thousands of years. The speaker turned to face Daniel and Lyra. Commander Daniel Hayes of Earth, Lyra of House Orth, you will explain yourselves. Daniel stepped forward. There is nothing to explain. Lyra is under the protection of the human delegation. She saved our ship and our lives. We are grateful. The Kryn ambassador made clicking sounds that the translator turned into sharp words. Grateful? You harbor a weapon of mass destruction and call it gratitude? Humans are even more foolish than we thought. She is not a weapon, Daniel replied calmly. She is a person. She crushed 12 ships like insects. The Kryn waved his forearms in agitation. How can you say she is not dangerous? I did not say she was not dangerous. I said she was not a weapon. There's a difference. High Chieftain Zorath stood up from his seat. His massive form cast a shadow across the chamber floor. His voice echoed like thunder. The human speaks nonsense. Lyra is Valkyrie by blood. She belongs to my house. I demand her return. Lyra's scales flickered slightly, patterns of light dancing beneath the gray. I refuse. The chamber fell silent. No one had expected the quiet gray daughter to speak, let alone to defy her own father. Zorath's eyes narrowed. You dare refuse me? Yes. Lyra stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. You sent me away because you were ashamed of me. You wanted me gone so you would not have to look at me anymore. You never wanted a daughter. You wanted a weapon, just like everyone else. She gestured around the chamber. Look at them all. The Kryn want to contain me. The Shurdai want to study me. You want to control me. Everyone sees what I can do and thinks only of how they can use it. She turned to face Daniel. But not him. Not the humans. They saw something different. The council speaker leaned forward. And what did they see, Void Weaver? Lyra smiled sadly. They saw a lonely girl who just wanted to be accepted. They saw someone who was kind and thoughtful and scared. They did not care about my power. They cared about me. She turned back to the council. For thousands of years, my kind has been hunted. We have been called demons and monsters. We have hidden in shadows and pretended to be weak. And why? Because other species could not control us. Because our power frightened them. Our scales began to glow brighter, silver light shining through the gray. But the humans are different. They do not measure worth by power alone. They look at character. They look at heart. They saw value in me when no one else did. Daniel stepped up beside her. When I chose Lyra at the ceremony, everyone laughed. They thought I was a fool for picking the weakest daughter. They could not imagine why anyone would want her. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every ambassador. But I did not choose her despite her appearance. I chose her because of what I saw beneath it. I saw intelligence. I saw kindness. I saw someone who noticed things that others missed. Those qualities matter more than strength or beauty or power. He paused and took a breath. Humanity is a young species. We have only been among the stars for 300 years. The other races call us naive. They say we do not understand how the galaxy works. Maybe they are right. But maybe we understand something they have forgotten. And what is that? The council speaker asked. That every person has value. That true strength comes from within, not from weapons or armies. That the measure of a civilization is not how it treats its strongest members, but how it treats its weakest. Silence filled the chamber. The Shurdai representatives chimed softly, their colors shifting to blues and greens that meant thoughtfulness. The Kryn ambassador clicked his mandibles slowly, considering Daniel's words. Even High Chieftain Zorath seemed troubled. He stared at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Finally, the council speaker spoke. The human makes an interesting argument. Perhaps there is wisdom in their ways that we have not appreciated. The speaker turned to Lyra. Voidweaver, what would you do with your power if given the choice? Lyra did not hesitate. I would protect those who cannot protect themselves. I would stand against those who prey on the weak. And I would show the galaxy that the Voidweavers were never demons. We were guardians. We were meant to help, not to destroy. She looked at Daniel and smiled. The humans taught me that. In 3 weeks, they gave me more acceptance and kindness than my own people gave me in 30 years. The council debated for hours. Many species still feared Lyra and wanted her contained. But Daniel argued fiercely, and slowly, minds began to change. In the end, the council reached a decision. Lyra would remain under human protection. She would serve as a liaison between humanity and the Alliance. Her power would be used only in defense, never in aggression. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a beginning. After the meeting, Lyra and Daniel stood together on an observation deck, watching the stars. Thank you, Lyra said softly. For everything. Daniel shook his head. You saved us first. Remember the Wraith attack? If not for you, we would all be slaves or dead. You saved me long before that. Lyra turned to face him. You saved me the moment you took my hand in that hall. You showed me that I had value when I believed I had none. She reached out and took his hand again, just like she had on Vulcar Prime. My mother told me to hide forever. She said the galaxy would never accept what I am. But she was wrong. She never met humans. Daniel squeezed her hand. We are stubborn that way. We see the good in people even when they cannot see it themselves. Lyra laughed. It was a beautiful sound, free and joyful. Yes, you are very stubborn. In the years that followed, Lyra became a legend. She protected human ships and human colonies. She stood against pirates and slavers and those who would do harm. Other species began to study human philosophy, trying to understand how such a young race could see what ancient civilizations had missed. And whenever someone asked Daniel how he had known to choose the Plainest daughter at the ceremony, he would simply smile. My grandmother taught me something when I was a boy, he would say. She told me that the brightest fruit is often rotten inside, but the plain ones are usually the sweetest. I have learned to look past the surface of things. Anyone can see beauty. It takes wisdom to see worth. Lyra would stand beside him, her scales now shining silver for all the world to see. She was no longer the shame of House Zorath. She was the pride of humanity, and she was proof that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting only for someone wise enough to find them.